James sat on the cracked sidewalk, his back pressed against a cold brick wall, staring at the faded streetlight above him. The night was quiet except for the occasional passing car and the rustle of wind through the trash littering the gutter. His hands trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the last of his crumpled bills. $8. That was all he had left in this world. $8 between him and absolute nothing. He rubbed the worn paper between his fingers, as if trying to squeeze some warmth out of it. He thought about walking into the small diner across the street, ordering a hot meal, maybe even coffee. He hadn't had a hot drink in weeks. His stomach cramped painfully at the thought, but then the cold reality hit him. Once the money was gone, there would be no more. He had begged enough for the day. The town was small, and people were tired of seeing his face. James wasn't always like this. There was a time, not too many years ago, when he had a steady job in construction. He used to come home with dust on his clothes, but also with pride in his chest, because he was providing for his family. He had a wife, Anna, and a little girl with curly hair who used to run into his arms when he walked through the door. Life was simple, but it was good. Until the accident. One misstep on scaffolding, one bad fall, and his back was never the same. Doctors prescribed surgeries and therapy, but the medical bills swallowed them whole. The work stopped, the savings disappeared, and so did Anna. He didn't blame her. Living with a man broken both in body and spirit was a heavy burden. Still, the emptiness she left behind burned deeper than the hunger in his stomach. He was about to close his eyes when he heard it, the low, thunderous growl of a motorcycle approaching. The sound echoed against the empty buildings, making the night feel alive. A black Harley came into view, its chrome glinting under the dim light. The rider was a big man in a leather jacket with the infamous Hell's Angels patch on the back. James had heard stories about men like him, rough, dangerous, living by their own code. But the way the rider stumbled off the bike made James freeze. The man leaned heavily on the handlebars, one hand pressed against his ribs, his face pale with exhaustion. James's first instinct was to stay back. Trouble usually meant danger, and he didn't have the strength to fight or flee. But then he caught a better look at the man's expression. It wasn't anger or menace, it was desperation. The biker muttered under his breath, kicking at the bike as if it had betrayed him. Ran out of gas, he hissed, almost to himself. His voice cracked with frustration. Out of gas, out of cash, out of luck. James hesitated for a long moment. His stomach screamed at him, reminding him that those $8 could buy him food. But something in his chest pulled him forward. He knew what it felt like to be stranded, to have nothing, to feel invisible. He took a slow step closer and asked, "You okay, brother?" The biker looked up, surprised to be addressed by a homeless man in ragged clothes. His eyes narrowed, but behind the suspicion was a flicker of pain. "I'll manage," he grunted, though his body language said otherwise. James swallowed hard, then reached into his pocket. The bills felt heavier now, like they carried the weight of his entire existence. He pulled them out and held them up. "I don't have much, but I can get you some gas," he said softly. "It ain't much, but it'll get you where you need to go." The biker stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "You're telling me, you're giving me your last bit of money? You don't even look like you can feed yourself." James let out a short, tired laugh. "Maybe not. But I know what it's like to have nobody care. Maybe tonight, I don't let somebody else feel that." The silence between them was thick, broken only by the distant hum of cars. Finally, the biker nodded. "All right. Let's go." Together, they walked to the nearest gas station. James bought a small red canister and filled it, his hands trembling in the cold. He handed it to the biker, who poured it carefully into his tank. The engine roared back to life, vibrating the ground beneath their feet. The biker looked at James again, his face unreadable. "What's your name?" he asked. "James." The biker nodded. "Reggie. I ain't the kind of man who forgets a debt. You remember that." With that, Reggie swung his leg over the bike, revved the engine, and disappeared into the night, leaving James alone in the glow of the streetlight. James sighed, his stomach aching with hunger, but for the first time in months, his heart felt strangely light. He curled up under the bridge that night, empty-handed but not empty-hearted. The next morning, James was jolted awake by a sound that shook the ground beneath him. The roar of engines, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, filled the street. He scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, afraid he was about to be swept away by something dangerous. But what he saw made his jaw drop. A line of motorcycles stretched as far as his eyes could see. 1, 2, 10, 20, then more. Chrome gleamed in the morning sun, leather jackets with the Hell's Angels emblem glistened, and the air vibrated with raw power. At the front of the line sat Reggie, grinning from ear to ear. "This is him," Reggie shouted, pointing to James. "This is the man who gave his last $8 to help a stranger." The crowd of bikers erupted in cheers, revving their engines so loudly it sounded like thunder rolling across the earth. James stumbled back, tears already filling his eyes. He couldn't understand. Why were they here? Why would they care? Reggie climbed off his bike and put a heavy arm around James's shoulders. "You thought your kindness went unnoticed. You thought the world didn't see you. Well, guess what, we see you. You gave when you had nothing, and now we're here to give you everything we can." The bikers unloaded boxes of food, bags of clothes, and stacks of blankets. Some handed him cash, others handed him small gifts. But the greatest gift was the look in their eyes, respect, brotherhood, honor. One man even tossed James the keys to a small apartment they had rented for him. "No brother of ours sleeps on the streets," he said firmly. James's knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, sobbing. He had been invisible for so long, forgotten by the world, and now 300 men stood around him, lifting him back up. The days turned into weeks, and the challenges didn't magically disappear. James had to battle his own doubts, his own fears that it was all too good to be true. He had to relearn what it felt like to sleep in a bed, to eat 3 meals a day, to wake up knowing someone cared. The bikers kept showing up, taking him to job interviews, teaching him skills, encouraging him to believe in himself again. One day, Reggie handed him a framed dollar bill, signed by all 300 bikers. Written across it were the words, "Brotherhood is worth more than money." James hung it on the wall of his new apartment, a reminder that kindness never dies, it multiplies. Months later, James stood on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and gold. He thought about the night he chose to give away his last $8, the night he chose kindness over survival. That one decision had changed everything. He smiled softly and whispered into the wind, "Be kind always." And friends, that is the incredible story of James, the homeless man whose last act of kindness came back to him 100-fold. His story proves that even the smallest sacrifice can create a ripple of goodness far bigger than we imagine. Backhand index pointing right. What would you have done with your last $8? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel Be Kind Always, where I bring you more stories that show the power of compassion, kindness, and humanity. Because in the end, kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything.